The station called Threshold was older than most civilizations. It floated in the darkness between stars, a massive structure of metal and crystal that had seen empires rise and fall. Today, 47 species had gathered inside its great hall. They came from across the galaxy. Some had scales, some had wings. Some were made of living crystal. Some existed as clouds of light. They were all here for one reason. Humanity was joining the Galactic Concord ambassador. Vela Oren stood at the entrance of the great hall. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her stood 5 other humans, her delegation. They wore simple dark clothes. No medals, no weapons, nothing to show off. The hall was enormous. It could hold thousands of beings, and today it did. Floating platforms carried delegates from species that could not walk. Tanks of liquid held those who breathed water. The air itself was divided into sections, each with a different temperature and atmosphere for different species. Vela walked forward. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception in the room turned to watch her. Humans had been known to the galaxy for 300 years. They had traded with some species. They had fought with others. But they had never been invited here, to the inner circle of galactic power, until now. A being of pure crystal floated at the center of the hall. This was Archon-Teth Volume of the Silent Dominion. He was ancient, over 10,000 years old. His body caught the light and broke it into rainbows that danced across the walls. "Welcome, Ambassador Oren," the Archon said. His voice was like wind chimes. Humanity has waited long for this day. Vela bowed her head slightly. "We are honored to be here." The formal words were spoken. The ceremonies began. Species after species rose to give their greetings. Some were warm, some were cold. Some clearly did not want humans here at all. Then High Commander Drethanak of the Vorn. The Gemini rose from his platform. The Vorn were insects, or at least they looked like insects to human eyes. Drethanak stood 7 feet tall on 6 legs. His shell was black and shining. Its compound eyes reflected the light like 1,000 tiny mirrors. The Vorn had dominated galactic military matters for longer than humans had existed as a species. He did not offer greetings. "Humans among us," Drethanak said, his voice clicking and harsh. "There are questions that must be answered." The hall grew quiet. The Archon's crystal body dimmed slightly, a sign of concern. "High Commander," the Archon said carefully, "this is a ceremony of welcome. Questions can wait." "No," Drethanak said. "They cannot." He turned his many eyes toward Vela. She met his gaze without flinching. "We have studied humanity," Drethanak continued. "We have read your history, your public history. But there are parts that are hidden, parts that have been sealed away. 4 species are recorded as having had major conflicts with humanity." He raised one of his clawed limbs, and a holographic display appeared in the air. 4 names glowed in the darkness: the Kreth Communion, the Elvari Sovereignty, the Mindweavers of Nexus-7, the Harkin Empire. "These were not small civilizations," Drethanak said. "The Kreth ruled 200 star systems. The Elvari were feared hunters across 3 sectors. The Mindweavers had technology beyond most species' understanding, and the Harkin Empire." Paused. The Harkin Empire was the greatest power in the known galaxy. They had ruled for 50,000 years. The hall was completely silent now. Even the atmospheric system seemed to have gone quiet. "So I ask you, Ambassador Oren," Drethanak said, leaning forward on his platform, "where are they now? Where are the Kreth, the Elvari, the Mindweavers? Where is the mighty Harkin Empire?" Vela stood very still. Her delegation behind her did not move, did not speak, did not even seem to breathe. Around the hall, delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some species knew the stories, fragments and rumors. Whispered tales passed between traders and dark corners of space stations. But no one knew the full truth. "High Commander," Vela said at last. Her voice was calm, steady. "Those species made choices. Choices have consequences." The hall erupted. Delegates shouted. Some demanded explanations. Others demanded that Drethanak sit down and stop disrupting the ceremony. A few simply stared at the humans with new expressions on their faces. Expressions of doubt, of worry, of fear. Drethanak raised his limbs for silence. Slowly, the noise died down. "That is not an answer," he said. "That is an evasion. We are being asked to welcome humanity into the highest councils of galactic civilization. We deserve to know what happened, deserve to know what humanity is capable of." Vela looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the hall at all the watching faces. "You want to know what we are capable of?" she said. It was not a question. "Yes." Vela nodded slowly. "Then I suggest the assembly review the historical records themselves. All of them. The sealed files, the classified archives, everything." A murmur ran through the hall. The sealed archives had been closed for centuries. Even the Archon did not access them without great cause. "You would allow this?" the Archon asked, surprise in his musical voice. "We would request it," Vela said. "You should know who you are welcoming. You should know what happened." "Ah!" Drethanak made a sound that might have been satisfaction. Finally, honesty. "But," Vela continued, and something in her voice made the hall go silent again, "I want you to understand something. What you are about to see, what you are about to learn. We did not want any of it. We never wanted war. We never wanted destruction. We wanted only to live, to grow, to reach for the stars like every other species in this room." She paused. "Others made different choices. They chose to see us as prey, as resources, as a problem to be solved. They chose violence. They chose cruelty. They chose to try to erase us from existence." Her eyes swept across the hall. They failed. The word hung in the air like a blade. The Archon's crystal form pulsed with light. A decision was being made. "Very well," he said at last. "The archives will be opened. The Assembly will review the complete historical records of humanity's conflicts with the four named species. We will learn the truth." Vela bowed her head. "That is all we ask." She returned to her position. She passed close to Drethanak's platform. The Vorn commander looked down at her with his 1,000 eyes. "You seem very confident," he said quietly. "Most species would fear such exposure." Vela looked up at him. And for just a moment, something moved behind her calm eyes, something old. Something that had seen things that would make even the Vorn High Commander look away. "We do not fear the truth, High Commander," she said. "The question is, will you?" The archives began to open. The lights in the hall dimmed. The Assembly prepared to learn why for great civilizations had fallen silent. Why? When anyone asked what happened to the species that crossed humanity. Right. The only answer was silence. Eternal, absolute silence. The lights in the great hall dimmed until only the holographic display remained. The image of a Silenth appeared, floating in the air. This was historian Yelvani, recorded 280 years ago. His crystal body was younger then, brighter, but his voice carried the weight of what he had witnessed. "I will tell you about the Kreth communion," the recording began. "And I will tell you what humanity did when the Kreth came for them." The Assembly watched in silence as the story unfolded. The Kreth were a religious empire. They believed that their gods fed on suffering. Not just any suffering. The suffering of thinking beings. Of species who could feel fear and pain and despair. To the Kreth, harvesting this suffering was holy work. They had ruled 200 star systems. Dozens of species lived under their control, kept alive only to suffer. The Kreth did not want slaves. Slaves could be worked. The Kreth wanted something darker. They wanted fear factories. Worlds where entire populations existed only to scream. When the Kreth discovered humanity, they saw a gift from their gods. Humans were young. They had barely left their home system. They had 12 warships. 12. The Kreth had 12,000. The human colony of New Eden was their target. 40,000 people lived there, families, children, farmers, and teachers. And builders who had traveled across the stars looking for a new home. The Kreth did not send warnings. They did not make demands. They simply arrived. The recording showed images now. The Assembly watched as Kreth ships darkened the sky above New Eden. They watched as the colonists tried to flee, watched as the Kreth caught them. What followed was too horrible to show in detail. The recording became audio only. Sounds of screaming, sounds of crying. Sounds of the Kreth priests chanting prayers as they worked. The Kreth took 40,000 people, and they sent a message to Earth. "We have your children," the Kreth high priest said in the recording. His voice was wet and gurgling, like something drowning in oil. "We have shown them the truth of existence. Pain is the only reality. Suffering is the only prayer. Submit to us, and we will take only what we need. Resist, and every human world will become New Eden." To prove their point, the Kreth broadcast what they were doing to the colonists. They made sure every human in existence could see it, could hear it. The assembly sat in horrified silence. Several delegates looked away. One species, small beings with large eyes, were openly weeping. The recording continued. "Humanity went silent," historian Yelvany said. "For 2 years, they said nothing, did nothing." The Kreth laughed at them. They called humanity a broken species, a species of cowards who had retreated to their home system to hide. They were wrong. During those 2 years, humanity was not hiding. They were working. Every scientist, every engineer, every thinking mind in human civilization was focused on one thing: finding a way to fight back. They studied the wreckage from New Eden. They found Kreth shield technology in the debris. They learned how it worked. Then they built something new. Something terrible. They called it the Prometheus Array. The holographic display changed. It showed a star, burning bright and steady. Then something happened to it. The star began to pulse, to swell. Its light turned from yellow to orange to red dot, then it exploded. The Prometheus Array did not target ships, Yelvany explained. It targeted stars. It could reach across light years and destabilize a stellar core. It could turn any sun into a bomb. The first star they destroyed was the Kreth homeworld sun. The assembly gasped. Several delegates made sounds of horror. 20 billion Kreth died in seconds, the recording said. But humanity was not finished. Another star exploded on the display. Then another. Then another. The Kreth begged, Yelvany said. They screamed for mercy. They who had never shown mercy to anyone. They who had built temples of suffering across 200 worlds. They begged like children. They returned the surviving colonists. 6,000 out of 40,000. Most were broken in ways that could never be healed. The Kreth offered treasure, territory. They offered to worship humanity as gods. Humanity accepted the survivors. They accepted nothing else. The recording showed a final transmission from the Kreth. Their high priest, no longer proud, no longer gurgling with pleasure. He was on his knees. His ceremonial robes were torn. Behind him, the sky was red with the light of their dying sun. Great gods, the high priest wept. Why have you abandoned us? Why have you given our enemies such power? Why? Then a human voice responded. It was calm, quiet, cold. Your gods are not here. Only us. The transmission ended. The Kreth communion no longer exists, Yelvany concluded. Their 200 systems are empty. Their stars are dead or dying. Their worlds are frozen or burned. No one lives there now. No one will ever live there again. When we asked humanity why they did not stop after destroying the Kreth fleet, why they destroyed everything, they gave a simple answer. They said, we will never be harvested again. Not our children. Not anyone's children. The Kreth way of life had to end. Not their military. Not their government. Their way of life. So we ended it. The recording faded. The lights in the Great Hall slowly returned. For a long moment, no one spoke. High Commander Drethenak was the first to break the silence. His voice was different now. Quieter. Less certain. They destroyed 200 star systems, he said. An entire civilization. Because of one colony. Ambassador Vela Oren stood. Her face was sad, but not apologetic. 40,000 people, she said. 40,000 lives. That was what the Kreth took. That was what they tortured. That was what they broadcast across space to make us afraid. We were afraid, she admitted. Terrified. We knew we could not beat them in a fair fight. We knew we could not save our people. We knew that if we did nothing, it would happen again and again until there were no humans left. So we did something unfair. Something that would make sure it could never happen again. She looked around the hall. I do not ask you to approve of what we did. I only ask you to understand why we did it. And to understand that we gave the Kreth a chance. They could have left us alone. They could have released our people. They could have chosen peace. They chose to show us their cruelty instead. They chose to make us watch our people suffer. They chose to believe that we would break. Her voice hardened slightly, and we did not break. We evolved. We became what we needed to become to survive. She sat back down. The Archon's crystal body was barely glowing now. There are 3 more species on that list, he said quietly. 3 more stories to tell, yes, Vela said. There are. The delegates looked at each other. Many were afraid now. They were beginning to understand something important. Humanity was not a young species stumbling into galactic politics. Humanity was a survivor, and survivors were the most dangerous beings in the universe. The next record began to load. The second record began with a warning. The Archon himself spoke before the images appeared. What follows contains 2 accounts, he said. The fate of the Elvari sovereignty and the Mind Weavers of Nexus 7. Both stories are disturbing. Both stories show what humanity does when it is treated as prey. The hall waited in tense silence. After the story of the Kreth, many delegates had moved their seats farther from the human delegation, as if distance could protect them. The holographic display flickered to life. The Elvari were hunters. They had evolved on a world of endless forests, where only the strongest and smartest survived. Over millions of years, they had become perfect predators. Tall, fast, with 6 limbs and eyes that could see heat. They could track any creature across any terrain. When they reached the stars, they found that hunting animals was no longer exciting. They wanted a greater challenge. They wanted to hunt beings that could think, that could plan, that could feel terror. They hunted other sentient species. The Elvari did not conquer openly. They were smarter than that. They sent scouts to find isolated colonies. They identified targets. Then their hunting parties would arrive in secret, take a few dozen beings, and disappear. For decades, humans vanished from the edges of their territory. Ships found empty. Colonies with missing people. The authorities blamed pirates, blamed accidents, blamed the dangers of space. Then they took Captain Myra Vance. The recording showed her image. She was a military officer, 40 years old, with short dark hair and scars on her face. She had been captured while responding to a distress signal, a trap. She woke up on a hunting reserve, a planet owned by wealthy Elvari, designed for one purpose, the hunting of sentient prey. The Elvari gave their prey a head start. It was more sporting that way, more exciting. They expected Myra to run like all the others, to hide, to cry, to eventually be caught and killed. Myra did not run. The recording showed fragments of what happened next. Myra had been trained for survival. She found water, found food, found shelter. Then she started watching the hunters. For 3 months, she survived. The Elvari became frustrated. They sent more hunters, better hunters. Myra watched them all. Then she began hunting them. The first hunter died in a pit trap. The second was killed with a sharpened stick through the throat. The third walked into a snare and hung from a tree until he stopped struggling. The recording showed Myra standing over the 4th hunter, the one who had captured her. He was wounded, bleeding, trying to crawl away. His heat vision eyes were wide with something the Elvari had not felt in millennia. Fear, please, he begged. Mercy. Myra's voice was cold. Did you give mercy to the others? To the families you hunted? To the children? She did not give mercy. When Myra escaped the reserve world, she brought more than her freedom. She brought data, names, locations, the entire network of hunting reserves, the identities of every wealthy Elvari who had paid to hunt sentient beings. Humanity's response was not a military invasion. It was something more precise, Special operations teams entered Alvari space quietly. They moved like shadows. For 5 years, they worked in secret, targeting not the Alvari military, but the hunters themselves. The aristocrats. The wealthy. The ones who had treated humans as game, one by one. It disappeared. Then humanity released a broadcast across all Alvari channels. It showed the hunters being hunted. Running through forests they did not know. Screaming in terror. Begging for help that would not come. At the end of the broadcast was a simple message. The game has changed. The Alvari sovereignty collapsed. The common people rose up against their weakened masters. Civil war tore the empire apart. The species still exists, scattered across a dozen worlds. But they are shadows of what they were. When human ships pass through their territory now, the Alvari do not look up. They do not make eye contact. They remember what happens when they hunt humanity. The assembly sat in heavy silence. Then the third story began. The Mindweavers of Nexus 7 were not warriors like the Kreth, not hunters like the Alvari. They were something worse. They were parasites. The Mindweavers had evolved powerful telepathic abilities. They could enter the minds of other beings, read their thoughts, change their memories, and eventually erase the original mind completely and replace it with their own consciousness. It was the perfect form of immortality. When a Mindweaver's body grew old, they simply found a new one, a younger one, a stronger one. They took it over, erased the original owner, and continued living. They had done this for thousands of years with primitive species. Then they found humanity. Human minds were perfect hosts, strong, adaptable, long-lived. The Mindweavers saw humanity not as a species to fight, but as a resource to harvest. Billions of bodies waiting to be filled with Mindweaver consciousness. They came to Earth as friends. They offered technology, medicine, knowledge. Human leaders welcomed them. Human diplomats traveled too. Nexus 7 to strengthen the alliance. Then the diplomats came home different. Families noticed first. Small things. Wrong memories. Strange reactions. The person they loved was still there, but something was wrong. Something was missing. By the time humanity understood what was happening, thousands had been taken. Thousands of human minds erased, their bodies now puppets for Mindweaver consciousness. Humanity worked in secret. They could not attack directly because they would be killing their own people. So they found another way. Human scientists developed a device that amplified psychic energy, but not Mindweaver energy. Human energy. The original minds were not completely destroyed. They were suppressed, pushed down into the darkness of their own brains. Trapped but not dead, the amplification device woke them up. Across human space, in every stolen body, the original human consciousness surged back to life. They were confused, terrified, but they were also angry, so very angry. The Mindweaver consciousnesses found themselves drowning. Human thoughts, human memories, human rage crashed over them like a tidal wave. They could not hold on, could not fight back. They were swept away. Across light years, the feedback traveled through the Mindweaver psychic network. Connected to a stolen human, felt their stolen child die screaming. The psychic shock was devastating. On Nexus 7, the Mindweavers collapsed. Some died instantly. Others were left catatonic, their minds shattered by the echo of thousands of deaths. The few who survived could not function. They sat in silent rows, eyes open, seeing nothing. They are still there today, still sitting, still staring. The screaming in their minds never stopped. Ambassador Vela Oren spoke into the silence that followed. They tried to steal us, she said. Not our resources, not our territory. Us, our minds, our souls. They wanted to erase everything we were and wear our bodies like clothing. She looked around the hall. We gave them back what they tried to take. Every memory, every thought, every scream. We gave it all back at once. The Archon's light was barely visible now. One story remains, he whispered. The Harkin Empire, yes, Vela said. The biggest story of all. Several delegates quietly left the hall. They had seen enough. They understood. Those who remained prepared themselves for the final truth. The Archon hesitated before opening the final archive. His crystal body had dimmed to almost nothing. Around him, the remaining delegates sat in terrified silence. They had learned what humanity did to the cruel, the hunters, and the parasites. Now they would learn what humanity did to the powerful. The Harkin Empire, the Archon said. This archive has been sealed longer than any other. Even I have not viewed it in full. What follows is the truth of what happened 200 years ago, when the greatest military force in galactic history tried to destroy Earth. The display flickered to life. The Harkins were not monsters like the Kreth. They were not predators like the Elvari. They were not parasites like the Mindweavers. In many ways, they were honorable. They had laws. They had culture. They had art and music and philosophy. They had also ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. The Harkin Empire stretched across 10,000 star systems. Their military was legendary. Their technology was advanced beyond anything most species could imagine. They had crushed 100 rebellions. They had absorbed 1,000 civilizations. They believed with absolute certainty that they were the natural rulers of all intelligent life. Then they noticed humanity. Humans were expanding quickly, too quickly. In just 3 centuries, they had gone from a single planet to dozens of colony worlds. Their technology was advancing at an impossible rate. They were making alliances with species the Harkins had controlled for millennia. The Harkin High Council saw the pattern. They had seen it before with other rising species. If left unchecked, humanity would eventually challenge Harkin dominance. The Harkins did not hate humanity. They simply decided that humanity had to be eliminated. It was not personal. It was policy. The extermination fleet was assembled. 10,000 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet. 2 million. Harkin warriors, each one worth 100 human soldiers. The largest military force ever gathered for a single mission. Their target was Earth. Their objective was simple: complete extinction of the human species. The Harkins, in their arrogance, announced their intention publicly. They gave humanity 1 solar year to prepare their souls for the void. They expected terror. They expected surrender. They expected humanity to beg for mercy. Instead, humanity went quiet, just like they had before the Kreth fell. Just like before the Elvari hunted their last prey. Just like before the Mindweavers started screaming. The Harkins should have recognized the silence. They did not. 1 year later, the extermination fleet arrived at Sol. Earth's defenders numbered less than 1,000 ships. The Harkins laughed at the futility. Their commander broadcast a final message to the human population. "Your time is over," he said. "You were an interesting species. You showed promise, but you grew too fast, and now you must be pruned. Do not be afraid. It will be quick." The battle began. From the first moment, the Harkins knew something was wrong. Human ships did not fight like any enemy they had faced before. They were unpredictable, irrational, insane by Harkin standards. A human captain rammed his ship directly into a Harkin flagship, destroying both vessels. Human fighters flew into engine cores, sacrificing themselves to cripple larger ships. Entire crews voted to detonate their own reactors. Taking enemy vessels with them, the Harkins killed 10 human ships for every one they lost. It did not matter. The humans kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying. They fight like they have nothing to lose, the Harkin commander reported to his superiors. They fight like death is not something to fear. But the true weapon was not the fleet. For 1 year, humanity had been seeding the solar system with devices. Millions of them, small, hidden, waiting. Each one was a miniaturized Prometheus array. The same technology that had destroyed the Kreth stars, made smaller, made portable, made into a weapon that could create micro-singularities. Tiny black holes that lasted only seconds but were devastating beyond measure. As the Harkin fleet pushed toward Earth, confident in their inevitable victory, humanity activated the devices. The Great Hall fell completely silent as the recording showed what happened next. The Harkin fleet did not explode. It was erased. 10,000 ships, 2 million warriors, the greatest military force in galactic history, simply ceased to exist. They were pulled into 1,000 tiny points of infinite gravity and crushed into nothing. The whole thing took 6 seconds. 6 seconds to destroy 50,000 years of military supremacy. 6 seconds to end the myth of Harkon invincibility. 6 seconds to change the galaxy forever. But humanity was not finished. The surviving Harkon Empire expected retaliation against military targets. They prepared their remaining fleets. They fortified their strongholds. They waited for the war they understood. Humanity did not give them that war. Instead, human ships appeared in Harkon space and began destroying infrastructure. Shipyards, fuel stations, communication relays, supply lines. They did not attack civilian populations. They did not bomb cities. They simply dismantled everything the Harkon military needed to function. It was surgical, precise, devastating. The Harkon Emperor sent message after message to Earth, demanding to know humanity's terms for peace. What did they want? Territory? Resources? Tribute? The human response finally came. It was short. We could end you. We choose not to. Today, disarm. Withdraw. Remember, the Harkon Empire, which had never surrendered to anyone in 50,000 years, surrendered unconditionally. They dismantled their remaining fleets, withdrew to their core worlds. They released every species they had ever conquered. They became what they had never been before. A small, quiet civilization that did not threaten anyone. The recording showed the final image. The Harkon Emperor, ancient and proud, signing the Articles of Surrender. Standing behind him were 3 human officers. They were not gloating, they were not celebrating. They looked tired, sad. One of them was speaking quietly to the Emperor. The recording captured his words. We did not want this war. We never wanted any of this. You could have left us alone. You could have let us grow beside you instead of trying to cut us down. The Emperor looked at him with eyes that had seen millennia of conquest. Would you have done differently? If you saw a species rising that might one day threaten your existence? The human officer thought for a long moment. Then he shook his head. I do not know. But I know this. We will never find out. Because we will never try to exterminate another species simply because they might become powerful. Or not you. Its recording ended. Ambassador Vela Oren stood slowly. The great hall was silent, except for the sound of beings breathing, their hearts beating, their minds racing. The Harkon Empire still exists, she said. They are a fraction of what they were. Their population has declined. Their military is gone. But they live. She paused. We gave them something we did not give the Kreth, the Alvari, or the Mindweavers. Gave them survival. Because they were not cruel. They were not hunters. They were not parasites. We're simply afraid of what we might become. Her voice softened. We understood fear. We had felt it ourselves. So we answered their fear with restraint. We showed them that humanity does not destroy for the sake of destruction. We destroy to survive. And once survival is assured, we stop. She looked around the hall. That is the final lesson. That is what separates us from the species we defeated. We know when to stop. The Archon's light slowly returned. One question remains, he said. What now? Vela smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Now we answer your original question. Now we tell you why we came here today. The final part of the story was about to begin. The archives closed. The lights in the Great Hall slowly returned to normal. But nothing else would ever be normal again. 40-7 species sat in silence. They had come here to welcome a young civilization into their alliance. They had expected to be the teachers, the guides, the elders, who would show humanity how the galaxy worked. Now they understood. Humanity did not need teachers. Humanity had already learned the most important lesson the galaxy had to offer. They had learned it in fire and blood and screaming stars. They had learned what it took to survive. High Commander Drethanak of the Vorn hegemony was the first to move. He stood slowly, his great insectoid body trembling slightly. His compound eyes no longer held arrogance. They held something that looked very much like respect. I withdraw all objections to human membership in the Concord, he said. His voice was quiet, humble. I withdraw them completely and without conditions. Around the hall, other delegations signaled their agreement. The vote that had been expected to be controversial, perhaps even contested, became unanimous in seconds. But Ambassador Vela Oren raised her hand. "Before you finalize your vote," she said, "I want to speak." The hall fell silent again. After what they had seen, no one would refuse humanity anything, but they were also afraid of what she might say next. Vela stood and walked to the center of the hall. She looked old in that moment, tired, like someone who had carried a heavy weight for a very long time. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "Everything you saw in those archives represents failure. Not victory, failure." The delegates looked confused. How could the destruction of their enemies be failure? "We failed with the Kreth," Vela continued. "We failed to find a peaceful solution. We failed to stop them before they took our people. We failed to save more than 6,000 out of 40,000 colonists. We failed to find any other way." She paused. "We failed with the Elvari. We failed to notice the disappearances sooner. We failed to protect our people from hunters who saw them as game. We failed to find justice without becoming hunters ourselves." Her voice grew heavier. "We failed with the Mindweavers. We failed to see through their friendship. We failed to protect our diplomats from having their minds stolen. We failed to find a solution that did not leave an entire species trapped in eternal screaming." She looked at the empty spaces in the hall where Harkin delegates would have sat. "We failed with the Harkin Empire. We failed to convince them that we were not a threat. We failed to stop a war that killed millions on both sides. We failed to find a way forward that did not require us to break the greatest civilization in galactic history." She spread her hands. Every single one of those wars was a failure. A failure of diplomacy. A failure of understanding. A failure of hope. We never wanted any of it. We never wanted to become what we became. The hall was completely still. No one had expected this. They had expected pride, boasting, warnings. They had not expected grief. "But we will not apologize for surviving," Vela said, and her voice grew stronger. "We will not apologize for protecting our children and our worlds and our future. Every species in this hall has faced threats to their existence. Every species in this hall has done what was necessary to survive. We are no different." She looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate. "You wanted to know what happened to the species that crossed humanity. Now you know. They chose to see us as prey. They chose to see us as resources. They chose to see us as problems to be solved. They chose to believe that our kindness was weakness, that our mercy was fear, that our hesitation was inability." Her voice hardened, just slightly. "They were wrong. They were all wrong." She let those words settle into the silence. "But you have a choice they never made. You can choose to see us as partners, as allies, as friends. We offer that hand openly. We have always offered it." Ouch. She gestured toward a section of the hall where several delegations sat together. "The Volanthi met us with respect. We have traded with them for 200 years. Their civilization has flourished alongside ours. The Sora trusted us with their greatest secret, and we protected it when others would have exploited it. The Mendi were dying when we found them, and we gave them medicine that saved their species. These are the relationships we want. These are the futures we hope for." She pointed to the empty spaces. "That is silence. But it does not have to be your future. The choice is yours. It has always been yours." She returned to her seat and sat down. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Archon Teth Volume floated forward. His crystal body was glowing again, brighter than before. When he spoke, his voice was filled with something new, understanding. "We have asked our question," he said. "We have received our answer. Humanity has hidden nothing from us. They have shown us their darkest moments, their greatest failures, and their terrible victories. They have trusted us with truth." He turned to face the human delegation. "On behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome humanity as full members. Not because we fear you, but because we understand you. You are survivors, as we all are. You have paid the price of survival, as we all have. You belong among us." The vote was formalized. Humanity was officially part of the Concord. As the assembly began to disperse, the Archon approached Vela privately. His voice was soft, meant only for her. "You could have hidden this history," he said. "You could have let us believe you were simply a young species eager to join the galactic community. Why show us everything?" Vela smiled. It was a sad smile, but also somehow warm. "Because secrets breed fear," she said, "and fear breeds conflict. We have had enough conflict. We want peace. Real peace, built on truth. Now you know exactly who we are, and you know exactly what happens if peace fails." The Archon considered this. And if another species makes the same mistakes, if another empire decides that humanity must be destroyed? Vela's smile did not waver. But something moved behind her eyes. Something old. Something that remembered watching stars die. "Then there will be silence," she said simply. Again, the Archon looked at her for a long moment. Then he extended one of his crystalline limbs. It was an ancient gesture, one used between equals. Between friends, Vela took his hand. Her grip was firm and warm. "Welcome to the Concord, Ambassador," the Archon said. "Thank you, Archon," Vela replied. "We have waited a long time for this." They stood together as the other delegates filed out of the hall. Some walked quickly, eager to report what they had learned to their governments. Some walked slowly, lost in thought. A few stopped to look at the human delegation with new eyes. Not fear, not hatred. Something else, respect. As Vela turned to leave, High Commander Drethenak approached her. The great Vorn warrior bowed his head, a gesture of submission his species had not shown to anyone in centuries. "I was wrong about your species," he said. "I thought you were children playing at civilization. I thought you needed to be taught your place." He straightened. "I understand now. You know your place. You carved it out of the darkness with blood and fire and the death of stars. You earned it." Vela looked up at him. "We did not want to earn it that way. We wanted to earn it through friendship, through cooperation, through peace." "I know," Drethenak said. "That is what makes you terrifying. You wanted peace. You offered peace. And when peace was refused, you became something else entirely. Something that burns stars and ends empires." He leaned closer. "What happens now that you have peace?" Vela smiled. It was the brightest smile she had given all. "Day now, we become what we always wanted to be. Explorers, builders, friends." She looked out at the stars through the grate windows of the station. "The silence is behind us. What comes next? That is up to everyone." She walked away, leaving the Vorn commander standing alone, staring at the stars that suddenly seemed much less safe than they had that morning. But also, perhaps much more interesting, the humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same.